Oh, where do you start? The passion.
Yes.
The reason probably why I'm here and why I'm so passionate and vocal is I'm a child out of the system.
Mm.
I grew up with a lot of intergenerational trauma, intergenerational violence, which is really hard. I have a white dad and a black mum, and I grew up in this very privileged fence line of being too white or being too black in spaces.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I was in the system and looking for help that I realized that that's actually a privilege for mine. And I use that now to help my younger generation.
How much did that affect you growing up?
Oh, I don't think it ever stops affecting you, really.
Really?
Yeah, I think it makes you the person you are. I come from a long, long line of staunch women who are vocal for what they believe in, and so it was instilled at me at a very young age that you don't fight. Like, you don't fight, but you don't back down from what you believe in. And the
Mm.
traumas that I endured, I realized that we're just kids.
Yeah.
I was a child. Um, and that's my biggest thing is like children deserve like a childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And many children get robbed that opportunity.
oh, every day.
Whether it's culture, whether it's religion,
Mm,
family violence.
correct. Yeah.
That 6 months or that year or that 2 years could take a lifetime off the opportunity of the child.
Oh, I think it takes a whole experience of learning
Mm.
and education as a child. You don't realize how detrimental the minor things are that your parents tell you are. You think you're fighting back, and when you don't have that stability and that constant, I would say like consistency,
Mm.
you struggle, you lack. And as a child, my family faced a lot of hardship, and unfortunately, a lot of my family members were engulfed by grief really quickly. So we had to grow up really quickly.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's a hard one.
It is. It's very critical. And what's crazy is, a lot of the women had to be staunch in order to survive.
Correct.
But that comes with a flip side because they grow up trying to survive and they're so staunch, but then their children cop that. And because all they get from their parents is staunchness.
Mm-hmm.
And then it reflects onto the children and it continues.
Correct. Because we live in a world where I'm sitting in a room full of men when I say this, but it's a men's world, right?
Mm.
But in reality, women are behind those men.
Yes.
That men don't stand there alone. There's a woman in someone's ear always.
100%.
I had this conversation with someone literally last week. You look at Barack Obama, for instance. He's got a beautiful, strong woman behind him who grounds him and like shows that there's more to life than just what a man's world is, right?
100%. I think every great leader or king has a strong woman behind him, and that can help you conquer.
Correct. We look at it from a different perspective.
What do you think it's changed nowadays?
I think the world is realizing that we care for not only our men, our women, and our land. We care for everything. We think of everything in the moment, not just one thing. We come to the table with everything on the table.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
And that's why I say, for example, like my mother, I'm here because of her.
Mm.
And I owe a duty to her,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's care, looking after her, or loving her, or cherishing her. I can never repay her.
Correct.
It's impossible.
Correct. I always say I'm here because of the stories my grandmother and my mother told me of their experiences. And that was the drive of my fight, is that I've got two younger siblings.
Mm.
And I always say that they're my reason why. Is no child ever deserves to be unlucky in a system or not thought about because they're not lucky. I was lucky.
Yeah. And some people don't get lucky.
I see it every day.
What do you feel like is the biggest problem nowadays you see with the youngsters or cultures?
Ego.
Yeah.
Ego. Ego is the biggest thing you see in the youth, like, today, is because, like, we didn't grow up with social media the way that they are. We didn't grow up with being put on a pedestal the way that they are.
Yeah.
For things that should never be put on a pedestal. I work in the
Is
only
there
youth.
fun?
I work in the only youth access point in Victoria. I see it every day. I see how much ego can affect someone's whole life.
Especially the young children.
Mm.
And what is it about ego that one? Is it power? Is it money?
I think it comes from different cultures,
Mm.
understanding of different cultures and like power dynamics. But that's because we're a multicultural country here.
Mm.
And that's what we firstly don't recognise First Nations culture. So how are we going to recognise anyone else's culture either?
Yeah, true.
You know, it's I talk about it all the time with like land and like the way we care for our kids. You hear it all the time. Even you hear that Southern Cross. That's one of our like native astrology trackers.
Really?
Yeah, it's like anyone Googles it. It's like our stars we're huge star people.
Yeah, I remember I was speaking to Jarvis about it. He didn't really give me much of a detailed description of it, but he was kind of explaining about stars and how they tell time, and it has certain things. And I'd love to get someone on to kind of get in detail to explain what that is. But what is it about stars?
There's a lot of different ways we we track the land with stars. Like Jarvis said, it's like time.
That's incredible.
Even in the Western world, we use like stars and sun in the way that they look at the time, and it's just people don't actually realise that it's First Nations culture that you look at every day in a Western eye. You just don't see it as First Nations.
Yeah, because DT was explaining. He goes, if they ask the questions, we'll be able to give you the answers.
Correct.
To how to turn off a fire.
Correct.
By using kangaroos as tracking.
Yeah.
I was like, what? How do we not know this stuff?
Correct, and this is why we need to be like, this is why DT is so detrimental to our culture, and people like DT is because if we don't preserve that, we're going to lose that, and our kids are going to lose that. Like, I don't have children. I'm 27. My kids won't ever, like, if we don't like have it, and at the moment, like at home, I'm not from Victoria. I'm New South Wales mob, so we don't speak. We speak a lot of language. We don't have a lot of written language, and at the moment, we're trying to preserve our written language because otherwise, we lose it.
Do you feel like it's improving?
It is. I can speak language now.
Really?
I couldn't as a kid. You know what a coolaman is?
What's that?
Like a baby carrier. You heard of you see them all the time at like smoking ceremonies.
Yes.
Yeah, coolaman is a native word to my tribe. It's just used out throughout Australia now.
Yeah.
It's a Gamilaroi language, like word.
That's fascinating.
And are you guys like with language and stars and things like that, all these things that are for your culture, are you is that something that a lot of you guys are taught as youth, like as babies? Is there some sort of education program?
It goes through our elders.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, my siblings are pretty lucky. Like a lot of our elders have sat down and will educate now, and I'm super lucky as well. I was probably in that generation that got a lot more than, we did say like DT and all the older like boys who didn't. You wouldn't have seen that in school.
Yeah, it's. I was talking to Jarvis about it, and he's like, it is improving as time is progressing, but it's at a very critical time.
It's so critical right now.
And most important is youth. They are the seeds that we are planting for the next future. You know,
they're not our future generation. They're not our future leaders. That we are the leaders of today.
Yeah, and they look up to us.
Correct.
You know, a lot of people point fingers and say, "Oh, the youth." But hold up, they're looking up to us. We are the leaders of them. You know what I
Correct.
mean? They're going to point fingers and say, oh, but our leaders are doing that,
Mm.
you know? So it's so important to invest into our youth, but also ourselves
Correct.
to be these role models.
Correct. Because if we don't invest in ourselves and care for ourselves, we're going to get burnt out. And there's a lot of burnt out people right now in culture. In the last 3 years, we've had to deal with some horrific things for our people, and there's no support either. We're just expected to stand up and fight for us. But it's like, it's not just our fight. I said it at the march this year. Someone asked me the question and I said, we are literally 3% of a population. How do you expect us to get up and fight for a whole 97%? It doesn't work.
It's a big war.
Correct.
Take me back in time a little bit, growing up.
Yeah. Where do you start?
How was your journey growing up? You know, obviously having the father and the mother. How much did that impact you? You know, whether it was school or people judging and.
I grew up. Unfortunately, I grew up in a really hard custody battle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember a lot of my childhood in a really bad custody battle. So I was always in two worlds because obviously, you know, you're trying to live with one parent and love another. It's hard.
Very hard on young kid.
Correct.
Because unfortunately, I've realized this. Divorce gets the worst out of people. That's when you really understand how bad people can become.
Yeah.
And the hatred between one another. And then the parents start to lie. Oh, your mother's this and your mother's that, or your father's that. And then the child gets stuck fighting.
Correct. And unfortunately, like having like families who aren't of same culture, it's so hard. I was really, really lucky. Shout out to my dad. He was such a pivotal person for my culture. Even though like he was not First Nations, he and my grandmother were very much a part of our First Nations upbringing and instilling that in us and to be proud. I grew up in a school literally being me and my brother, the only two Aboriginal kids.
How was that impact?
It's crazy.
Really?
Yeah, I remember being asked in like year 4 to do the acknowledgement just because I was Aboriginal. So yeah, I remember things like that if you'd understand, I can't actually do a welcome or I can do an acknowledgement. I can't do a welcome here in Victoria. Not my land, not my place. And yeah, unfortunately, used as a token in those white systems. And then I was pretty lucky that I went to a private school for some of my upbringing, but that also instilled the racism.
Didn't stop.
Didn't stop. I was too black for the white kids, and then I go home to Echuca, and I was too white. You know, and it's like that pivotal moment of like realization as a kid of like not fitting in and not feeling worthy enough. When I'm so proud, I was always taught to be very proud. My grandmother, my great grandmother, and my grandmother fought really hard during the stolen generation because they were white, light skinned, blue eyed. So I was always instilled that didn't matter what colour you were always Aboriginal or First Nations. So it took a toll on me. I think growing up as a kid, especially a young girl and an all-girls school, I think as well, that really, it took a toll, and that's when I wanted to go home. I wanted to be with Mob. And
how old are you at this point?
27 this year.
No, at that when you were younger.
I was 12 to 14.
You're just like, I've just had enough of the
12 to 14, and I was just like out. I was like, get me I need to be home on country with my mob, with my grandma, with my mum.
Was it the words that was affecting you, or?
I think it was the displace of like, I knew I was Aboriginal, but there's no Aboriginal person around me. And my dad being white, he tried so hard. He did everything he could in his power and his knowledge and his education. But there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, good on him for trying.
Yeah. Oh, there was
support.
times that we'd get middle of the night phone calls and we'd be in a car 18 hours away from Melbourne in less than 24 hours time, just because he knew how big those things were for us as like First Nations people. So
how was your transition from school to the mob? How was that journey?
That's where life took a real big turn, I think. I got home to mob and I lost like the one person in my life that mattered the most at that time. My uncle, my mum's brother, passed away, and
Rest his soul.
yeah,
Death is a strange one.
yeah, rest in the dream time. But he was the person that, like, you know, was proud and would wanted us to be better, wanted us to play the footy. I played girls footy because of him.
There's always that one person
One person, right?
that just shines.
Correct.
Different.
And yeah, so it he saw the light in us kids. All of us kids. It didn't matter if you were his family. It was just community. So yeah, when he died and I was in the like 9, I think. I spiraled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I spiraled really bad. I was already in the process of like getting into drugs and alcohol, just like in high school, I think, in the days. But then it spiraled.
What is it about him you loved the most?
Damn, that was one.
I asked that because my uncle was very special to me as well, you know, and he passed away, and there's something beautiful about people that are just special.
Yeah, I think the power to see the good in people. Yeah, he forever. It didn't matter who you were. He would just see the good. He would stop. He would have a conversation.
Such a positive mindset.
He was the first person I remember stopping for a homeless person on Christmas Day, and just things like that, like stories like that of him.
Make people like that special.
Yeah, he didn't matter. It did not matter where you came from to him. He would just whoever you were at the face of him, at face value.
Built different. Some people like that. I say a lot of people, they come once in your life. They appear for a certain time and then they go.
Yeah.
Why, I don't know. You know, so many questions. You know, with death, it's strange because you miss that person and you just want to talk to them and you just want to see them.
Yeah.
But you know you can't.
Yeah. It's weird because I was so angry at the world. Yeah, there was so much going on in my life at that time. There was like a massive assault that I had endured. And at that time, he was like my protector. And he just like vanished overnight. And it not only myself, my whole family took it huge. But I couldn't see a point in life anymore after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spiraled into a severe drug addiction, violent relationship.
Because of you missing him, yeah.
It was just that he was the one person in my life that was like, it didn't matter, the relationships. He was always just happy. Like, he was that like calm in the chaos of life. Like even through the custody battle, like I vividly remember like being a 5-year-old running to him, like on the street. And it's like those things is like, he was always there when you just needed him. And then when I needed him, he just wasn't anymore. And it was like, that's when I was like
Angry.
angry.
Yeah.
I was not religious, but I was so. My grandmother is. But and I was so angry. I could not understand why that person was. He was healthy. He was 48.
You know what's strange is people don't stop to ask why you're actually angry.
Mm.
You know, just calm down. You know they passed away, and we know this.
Mm.
But what's really contributing to our making us
Correct.
angry?
Well, I always say it to clients and in the workspace is that anger and sadness are the same thing. They just come out in a different projection.
Mm.
The way you project it is completely different. I see an angry person, and I will sit down and I'll have a conversation to them over a sad person, because I know that they're not looked at. They literally just need you to sit down and have a conversation and see them as a person, and they actually just need to be like sad. Let them be angry. Let them be sad. Especially kids.
Oh yeah.
I see it all the time at work. In the system, our kids are angry, and it's not their fault, but our system isn't built for angry kids. And now our kids are suffering because of it. They're in jail. They're dying. I see it all the time.
And I feel like a lot of kids just want to be heard. They just want someone to just listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and vibe with them,
Mm-hmm.
because they're missing that protection either from their father or their mother to love, and they go seek it out outside with their friends and trouble and mischief and the pain. They don't know how to deal with it because they're so young, so they turn to drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm. A lot of kids just want to. They also just want to be seen as a human and a child. A lot of the time, adults see and don't want to sit there and be like, why is this child angry? It's probably because their parents did something or something, when in reality, no, there's deeper root causes. You see it in the youth crime statistics all the time. These boys aren't going out and killing people because they think it's fun. There's an underlying root cause.
How did the journey after your uncle passed away, how did that go from there? Got really dark.
So dark. I couldn't even tell you how many years it was. I have a blank in memory.
Just of hardship.
From like the solid age of, like, I was like 16, 17 to it was 2020, so what, 6 years ago, 7 years ago now.
It's a long journey.
Mm.
Once the alcohol and drugs come in, you got a bad mixture.
Yeah.
But we only abuse them because we're really we're trying to navigate away from the problems and the pain. But in reality, it just makes it worse.
Correct. And there's not enough supports for kids to actually understand why they feel the way they do. Our system is only dedicated to adults and why they're angry and why they're hurt. But in reality, we don't look at our children.
I've never really, actually, that's a good point because I've never really thought about that.
I see it all the time. My biggest passion is unaccompanied minors.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Unaccompanied minors are people who live in family violence, live in domestic violence, live in anything, homelessness, abuse, and they look for help, but because they're under a certain age, they don't get help. You have to be with a parent. I was denied help from probably 14 to probably 17 and a half, because I was finally I was turning 18. I can have a voice for myself. But unfortunately, these kids want to get out early, and we're not allowing them. We're like keeping them in this loop, this vicious cycle of life.
And a lot of them are scared to go to their parents.
A lot of them are, like, the perpetrators are their parents.
Yeah. Family violence and abusive father. alcohol.
You said it twice on this right now. You said fathers twice. First, majority of the time, it's actually mothers.
Really?
It is. A lot of people don't see that, but it's because the mother is enduring violence from the father. She'll perpetrate violence to the children because it's the only way of communication in that line of communication. That's where the supports stop. We need to start with our early intervention. Our kids deserve a voice first before the fathers and the mothers.
Mm.
They have to live with this for the rest of their life.
What would you construct that would really help some of these youngsters? What are some ideas would you say?
It's allowing them to have a voice. The system isn't built the way that children are. I actually lived in the building I work in. 6 years ago, I left this building and I thought I would never ever walk back into this space. 2 years later, I was like just randomly approached because they saw something in me. This person that I always say I was lucky. They were the one person at the time in this youth refuge that saw me as a human. And it was because they took a photo of me in a uniform. And I didn't have anyone to take that photo and to show how proud they were of me. And when I got that phone call, I realized that it's a privilege to be able to have these conversations for kids who don't have this voice. Unfortunately, I see kids die all the time.
So sad.
Yeah. In my line of work, unfortunately, people think that it doesn't happen, but it does on a regular basis. And they're dying without any support, without any family, with nothing.
So you pretty much work in the space of youth work, supporting.
Yeah, I'm a lived experience advocate.
Just for youth or?
Majority.
Yep.
Yeah. Adults are adults. We have voices. If we want to speak, we can. And we also have built systems built for us.
Yeah, but the youngsters.
Our kids don't have that. Where do they go if they're unsafe? They go to a student counsellor or someone. That also goes back to the perpetrator straight away.
Yeah.
How is that safe for our children? It's not.
It's not.
It's not.
It's very strange because I know so many, growing up myself, I knew so many kids that were approached by certain counsellors and stuff. Counsellors couldn't do much because the kid was too afraid to talk because of his fear of his family. His father would hit him or dash him. So it's got this complex part to where the counsellors want to do stuff, but then the parents make it hard. I remember having a teacher on, a principal, and she was kind of talking about it goes back to the parents trying to communicate, but there's no communication.
No.
You know, and it creates this toxic environment for children. It's very sad.
And we also don't meet children where they're at. I'm a big advocate for meeting them where they're at. If my client comes in and they're heightened, they don't want to talk to me. Half the time they just need to sit down and breathe, go out for a walk, have a conversation, a coffee, just to be heard. But we don't have, the majority of the time, adults don't have time for that. I'm lucky enough to be a part of a lot of projects who co-design, and I've co-designed a lot for the last council and mayor. And then I've also worked in the federal and the state parliament sectors. Wow. I see it all the time. I've had a minister tell me after I've spoken, cried and said, "You're the reason I can see human after that story." I shouldn't have to come back into the system as someone who experienced that to be that person.
What are some recommendations for the listeners and especially the youth for them to start taking steps? What would you recommend for them if they are experiencing violence or trauma at home, or in an environment they shouldn't be in? What are some steps you would recommend for them to start taking?
I think it's to find a safe person first. You're never going to walk out of a house, or you're never going to walk out of something when you do not have someone safe. I walked back into a system multiple years in a row because I thought I needed to be that person for other people. But I did not have that person. Until I had that person, I would never have walked away.
Who could that person be? Anybody?
Anyone. I'm pretty lucky that my biggest aspiration is one of my sister girls.
Okay.
I'm really lucky that she's shown me a lot in just like woman, like to be a woman, to be a human in a society, and to grow up in a world that's changing with like our mob. Also our kids, it also doesn't start with art like them, it starts with the early intervention as us. Because where do they go? There's no any support places. I work at the only youth access point in the state. There's one. I also work on the team that literally funds out of home care. One person in the state does that.
Yeah.
That kids are getting missed every day.
Thousands.
Thousands. But unfortunately funding and things like that aren't put forward for unaccompanied minors. Because a lot of the time they needed an adult. I talk about it all the time with Aboriginal housing. They're horrible because their framework only is for women and children. There's not a single thing that says unaccompanied minors in there. What about those kids that are trying to flee those houses?
From bad environments.
Yeah. There's no access point, especially in the rural. That's why I had to leave Echuca. I could not get anything to help me. And I had to leave my whole connection, my mob, everyone, to just come back to, because I was experiencing severe trauma, and there was nothing there for me. No mental health, nothing.
And then that's where everything deteriorates. And it's so easy to point fingers and say, look how scummy that guy looks. Hold up, that's a big judgment.
Correct.
You got no idea where that guy's been, or where she's been, or where she's come from. I look at Jarvis, for example, and many of his people, and I look at him and I say, look where he is, man. That guy came from an addiction. I don't know many people that came back from an addiction. They're either dead or in jail.
Correct.
You know? Or look at yourself and the work you're doing, and the, inspiring and helping youth, and where you were. You could have easily chose a life of misery or drugs and alcohol and stay that. But no, you chose to move forward.
Yeah. I chose that. It actually wasn't even me that made that decision.
What was the inspiration?
It was my grandmother. I was in the youth refuge after leaving a really bad relationship.
What's a youth refuge?
A youth refuge is, so when you go into an access point, there's refuges so it's like a housing that will house you for short or long term. So we have week or months that you can stay there. It's similar to resi.
Okay. Commission housing?
Not really.
Not really?
More emergency.
Okay.
So let's say if someone, a client comes in there, left a severe domestic family violence situation, we'll probably put them into a youth refuge or emergency accommodation.
And how are them environments?
Terrible.
How many people are living in these houses?
It can change. I lived in 2 different youth refuges, but the one I spent nearly 11 months in, there was 7 of us. Yeah. And it was only because of COVID that no one ever changed. Usually they change weekly.
Nobody hears about this stuff. It's crazy.
You wouldn't even know that it's on King Street.
What?
I work across the road from Centrefold. The youth refuge is across the road from a strip club.
Oh my God.
The only one in the state.
So you got these youth, they got nowhere to go, end up in these places.
But also in the cycle of, they put these places in King Street, Melbourne.
Yeah.
It's the number one club, like nightclub in the world. That's the heart of drugs and alcohol in the city. And you're putting kids. Doesn't work.
And you know what's crazy? Some of these kids are really talented. Really, really talented. Like I went up to the flats a couple of weeks back and seen some of the youth there that were, you know, not I don't want to say gang, but they were just, you know, hanging around. And some of these guys were so talented,
So talented.
but nobody's really like asking these guys questions and inspiring them. Like, you know, let's give him an opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, like there was a guy that was 12 years old and he was talking to me about physics. I'm like, what? Yeah, it's numbers and science. And I'm like, what are you doing on the street, man?
You'd be so surprised at the conversations I have at work. You would look at people and be like, how? And these are children. Some of these people haven't even finished high school. And they are so smart.
Some of the people you experience, what is it mainly you feel like? Is it broken homes they're coming from?
Can be anything.
Mm.
Like a lot of broken homes, a lot of violence, a lot of disownment from parents because of sexuality. That's a huge one. There could be anything.
The list just goes on. I can't believe in King Street. I actually can't believe it.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
And like, is the government offering these guys like opportunities? Like, is there anyone coming around to say, look, hey, we'll help you get an apprenticeship or, you know, get into education?
I was literally lucky. I would not have a career if it wasn't for this one person that was a team leader when I was in this youth refuge. And because I had a job and they saw me change really quickly. I got out really quickly. I got sober within 10 months and I didn't touch it within 6 years because I had that fight to get clean and to stay clean because my grandmother, that was the last promise I made her.
Powerful.
Yeah, it was pretty much the last conversation I had with her. Is she could hear, I was working on the railway and she could hear my radio go off. She was really disorientated and confused. And then she said, please stay sober, please. Because she thought I was using and I wasn't. I hadn't been in a couple months. And I said, I promise I will. And then it's the only
Kept your promise.
It's the only promise I've refused.
Do you feel like sometimes she's looking down?
Always.
Yeah. And
Always.
you can't cheat. You can't break that promise.
No. I'm really lucky that they come out in different ways all the time. Even my uncle, we associate them with different animals. And in the weirdest way, you will see them pop up. I recently resigned from my youth work job because I saw I actually can't make a change in a youth work job. It needs to be in the system. And the fight is bigger than what is in youth refuges. And the day I resigned, I said, please tell me if this is right. And randomly, in the middle of the city, I saw these two random little bugs that you wouldn't see on King Street. And I said, this is it. Yeah. Because I've served my purpose in the youth space, or in the frontline space, I would say. I'm a kid coming out of the system. I'm burnt out. I walk in the building every day that I used to come into trying to stay sober.
How was your journey becoming sober? Because I know that's a difficult road. People don't understand how difficult that is.
Yeah.
whether it's drugs or alcohol, and both are crazy. But I learned later on in my life that alcohol is actually the scariest one to get off. You can actually die trying to get off alcohol.
Yeah, I was really lucky that I stopped drinking alcohol pretty quickly.
Was that the one that you were really...
It was my gateway drug, definitely. So was smoking weed, actually. I think that was it. My gateway drug at high school. And then I stopped smoking like weed and alcohol and like drinking alcohol, and I turned into like GHB and ice with amphetamines.
They're the next level. That's where a person needs to really question, because they take you down a very fast road of destruction very quickly.
Very, very quickly. And at 16 years old, a young girl in the city, I couldn't see how quickly it was. Before I knew it, I was 20.
That's very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another whole journey by itself
Mm-hmm.
that only you will ever remember.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really lucky that my best friend was one of my biggest supports in that time, and I met her through this time. And she just saw me as a human. Even now, she's still my best friend, and I will be forever grateful for her and her family, is because at the time they were the first family that I saw that actually like were a real family, and made me actually want to be a part of a family. And I think to feel safe enough, you know, yeah. So after I got to live with them for a little bit, and through my homelessness journey, I ended up, couldn't even tell you where I ended up for 4 years.
How was a homeless journey? That's a strange one always.
Really strange. People don't realise that homelessness isn't just living on the street.
And why I asked that, sorry to cut through, is people... I get this a lot when we're walking down the street with some of my mates, they'll say, oh, how does he get there? Or how does he get there? So I want you to kind of explain, how does a person actually get there? It's easier for us to judge and say, oh, he's homeless. But is it fast to really end up in that position, or is it a process?
It depends. My journey was... It was actually unknown to me for a while. I was living in spaces that I didn't actually realise that I was homeless. I just thought it was normal. It was my childhood. It was everything that I grew up with. Yeah, it was just normal to me.
Were you keeping in contact or keeping a relationship with your parents at this point?
Somewhat.
I
had a lot of shame around that time. I probably didn't see my younger two siblings for a solid 2 years straight. Because I just knew that I could not go home and be the way I was. I was 17, and
you wouldn't want to go home and say to yourself, oh, I can't face my parents or my father.
The first time I went home in 2 years, I put myself into a psychosis. Yeah. I went missing for like 3 months, and I come home just randomly one day, just rocked up at home. And I thought my uncle was at the door, and it was my sister. And I put myself into a psychosis. Just one conversation, just normal, randomly. I think I asked her to shut her door, and it sparked, I severely went into a drug-induced psychosis. Yeah. And that's when I realised I actually had, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And then I realised I was masking. And that's when I knew that I needed to become sober to understand what was going on.
Acknowledge.
Because I was always an angry kid. I used to be a very very angry, violent kid. I have a lot of shame around the way I used to conduct myself, but it was because I couldn't and I didn't know how
Explain yourself.
to express it. And then when I realised that I got this diagnosis really late in life and I was confused, and for my own peace of mind, I actually needed to become sober to understand what was happening. And that was like, it's funny enough, my sobriety date is the 1st of January. Yeah, I realised one New Year's that I was sitting in a really trap house doing some really shady things, and I said,
Just gotta go.
yeah.
It's so interesting, you know, what a person goes through and what clicks. What is the moment that, you know, what they're feeling. And it was crazy how it was New Year's and it was January 1st and you're like what was going on through your mind at that moment where you just like, I just need to stop? What was it? You were just tired? Were you?
I was sitting on the side of the road on a highway smoking drugs, watching the fireworks in the city. And I thought, no, I turned 21 this year. No, I'm not doing that. And I was severely masking it. I was working in a really, really dangerous job. And I should never have been ever anywhere near that place, unfortunately. And I realised that if I don't move and don't get out, it literally within the week of January 1st, I quit my job. I moved home. I left everything that I knew for a solid chunk of my life.
So inspiring.
And I
so inspiring, so powerful. People don't understand. I know so many people that are grown up now, still in drug addiction, and don't want to stop and acknowledge that they are the mistake. They just need to stop. You know, whether seek help, or you know, or they go seek help and then they run away from it. There's no discipline. You have to have some sort of discipline. You have to.
Yeah.
And you just said to yourself, I'm not doing this no more.
Yeah.
And it changed my life.
Yeah, it was
powerful.
I think it was the conversation with my grandmother really hit a core. Like after my uncle had passed away, I'd only been home once to country to visit like sacred sites. And I was high as a kite. No one knew. I was like literally had just turned 16, I think. And I was high as a kite. And I had so much shame around that I couldn't go home to face with what was happening to my nan with her passing with that shame.
Yeah.
And then I didn't end up going home because of COVID, and it spiraled again.
How long has it been now since you've been sober?
6 years.
Wow.
2020.
Salute to you.
Yeah.
That's an accomplishment.
Yeah, 6 years.
You look back at life now. What does that remind you? What do you tell yourself when you remember how things were?
I wish I could give that girl a hug. Yeah, that's like the thing I say the most is like, she just wants a hug. Like she just needs a hug. And like she would be so proud. I'm pretty lucky. Through my healing journey, I've used my art, and I also when I was a child, I said something on a home video about working in Parliament, and it was always a conversation about it. And now I get to use my art and my experience in Parliament.
That's an inspiration of where you were, where you are, and your uncle is proud of you, and your grandmother is proud of you, and all these incredible people around you, and the people you've helped. That's an inspiration, you know. And how are you these days?
I'm good. Like I said, I'm moving jobs. I found a passion in the kids section, but no one wants to talk about our kids.
Have to. So important.
No one wants to be a voice for our kids. in and I love talking, so I'll sit there and talk all they want.
Yeah. What's crazy is I bring some young people on here. They're like they're youngsters. They got a voice. In order to understand what's going on out there, we
Correct.
must learn from the children.
Correct.
What's bothering them? What's the problem?
Yeah, it's the same way. I like society is built for when society was built, like the time, like the same with like our mental health system, our homelessness system. It was built for when that was originated. But our society's changed so much, so drastically, that we're not actually listening to anyone who's living in the moment. Because my conversation is different to people who are experiencing now. I experienced it 6 years ago. I'm lucky enough to come back now and actually be a part of like helping the younger generation. I'm really lucky that one of the biggest things, like probably the proudest moments out of like advocating, is getting a letter from a young person I worked with saying that you just gave me normal life. You just saw me as a human.
That's so powerful.
And I was like that. It was kind of like I did it. Like I don't need to be.
There's no value on that.
No.
I swear that letter you probably have stored it somewhere.
Yeah, I have. It's actually on my desk, and it is going to my new desk because I think when on the hard days, I think that's like my why is the kids who don't have that like confidence. Because if I had that confidence years ago, I'd be a politician by now, probably.
Is that what you're aiming for?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, nice.
I was 4 years old and I told my parents I would be working in Parliament.
Yeah. How far are you from that? Getting close?
Not too far.
Yeah.
But I'm also about the grassroots. My community is more important to me than sitting in the literal heart of colonisation. Yeah, so I don't want to just bring myself up into that conversation. I just want to be the projector of other people's conversation.
Power. Give knowledge, growth.
I explain it like, you know, those megaphones? I just want, that's who I am. Like, I actually don't want praise. I hate anything to do with it.
Do you want to empower?
Yeah. I refuse to put my name on a lot of documents because why? I just want these young kids to be like, have a voice.
And it's the most powerful thing.
Yeah.
Is to allow them to have a voice, because I'll tell you, these guys, there's something special. I had a criminal lawyer I was talking to who works with Legal Aid, Ali, if you remember.
Yeah.
Inspiring stuff, he said. He goes, some of these street kids that come from this hard life, the moment they shift that to something positive, they go.
Majority
They won't
of
stop.
times these outlets that they've learned from young ages are toxic.
Yeah.
Once you put them into a positive outlet,
It's unstoppable.
you watch these kids thrive.
Yeah.
Like I'm really, really lucky that I work alongside like youth advisory groups, and I see it all the time. I see these young kids, and I'm really lucky. I've watched like a young First Nations woman come up the way I did and have her voice. Probably, and I had these conversations because she saw someone else who was First Nations and saw just she wasn't alone, and she had the confidence.
Message to the youth. From you to them.
I don't think you can give a message to the youth.
You know what's interesting? It's the second response I've got.
Yeah.
I remember, who was it? I think DT or someone else gave that response as well. It's very interesting. It's a different response.
They have the response.
Yeah.
I don't need to go into these conversations and have a response for those people.
Yeah.
I'm not living in their shoes. No.
What do you think something that you could, if you were talking to a young person, maybe they've lost their way or they're looking for something, what's something that you could communicate with them about with yourself, for instance, you've gone through all these challenges in your life. You're coming out the other end. You're trying to make good decisions. You've got your goal, which is Parliament. Maybe you've got a few different goals. Students, these young ones, they might not have any goals. What could you say to them that could give them some sort of direction to be able to work on something? Is there something that you could tell these ones?
I think the youth have to realise that they've always got goals. Our youth, like this new generation of youth, are very passionate. We're really lucky that, I hate the word woke, but a lot of the workspace I work in use that term is woke. But in reality, we're actually not. We aren't gullible anymore. Like I think that's the biggest thing is like, no, like you have that voice, like you are those people. Like you deserve to be in those spaces. I always, even now, I get sitting here, I've got imposter syndrome. But it's like, actually, no, I deserve this as much as anyone else. And it's also that, like, kids supporting kids. Like I said it earlier that, like, you know, we're First Nations 3%. We need to say kids are legit, like, our leaders.
That's true.
Like you see it now, you see it. Like you look at even this year, like I've been talking about it recently a lot with like the NAIDOC theme of 50 years of deadly. Those were kids though. Like those are my sisters, those are my brother, those are my cousins. We're all as deadly as each other. We've all got that voice. And one day, I think the kids don't realise is that we will be a part of history.
That's very true. That's very true. And that's what makes it powerful, I think, is when we shift our focus to the youth and empower them. Because I'm telling you, they can be deadly.
Oh, I always like say it in a sense, one of my aunties, I'm a descendant of Isabel Flick, who made a lot of noise for First Nations education in New South Wales. And I didn't realise how detrimental that was to like me and my advocacy in a lot of the time.
What was her name again, sorry?
Isabel Flick.
Isabel Flick.
Yeah. There's my auntie. But yeah, so she's huge for
social work.
Yeah, and it's been told that she was a big part of the Freedom Walk in Walgett. But I always think back to her, and I think she didn't actually realise how much of an impact she was making. At the time, she just wanted an education. She just wanted to be lucky like every other kid. She wasn't. But in reality, she is lucky because she was that one person who had that fight in her and changed the world. And she never would have realised that fight for those kids in that moment has changed New South Wales education system.
It's incredible the impact some people can have.
Correct.
Mind-blowing.
And I think that's that what youth don't understand is that, like, we always get told, I'm aging out and I'm not that I'm workshopping, but I'm very much pushing young kids to have that confidence to be able to step into these rooms. Because if you don't, and it literally could be anything. It's just about having that confidence and support enough to be like, hey, like, come on. And then once they literally have that, I always say it's like that warm hug that they feel at the start.
That's it.
They're unstoppable after that.
100%, and I think education plays a big role in there as well.
Early intervention always.
You know, education is very important for the youngsters. Keeps the mind critical thinking constantly and evolving. The moment education stops. And people might think, I remember Judith corrected me about this. She's like, people think education is just university. No. Education is more than that. You know, it's understanding philosophy and maths and science and
I don't have a
how life
university
is.
degree.
Yeah. Look at that.
And it's funny you say that because my first ever day on my youth work job, I had a client ask me, what are you doing in like the staff? Like you're a youth. I said, no, I'm actually a staff member. And they said they were confused, and I had to explain that I'm a peer worker and a lived experience advocate at the moment. But a peer worker is someone who has lived that, who is literally just coming in to help you navigate what you don't know.
Sorry.
Because we've lived that life. And it's you'd be surprised at the conversations I'd have every day. Just,
You must hear some really difficult stories.
but it's also, I don't call them difficult, I call them empowering.
I like how you said that.
Yeah.
Empowering. Because does it empower you?
No, it empowers them. Yeah.
Transform, because they can use that and shift it into positivity.
Correct, because most of the time they're walking out of these spaces and thinking that it's normal. Your majority of the time, I'm one of the first people that they're saying, hey, this isn't actually normal. And you're empowering those feelings.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
A message from you to the world.
I don't have a message.
Really?
I don't think
Life that's taught you something that you've learned along your journey.
my biggest message is that, like, not to the world, to the kids, is you're not lucky. Like, don't ever have that. I hate that. I always say it is, I felt lucky to be that person, to be that one. You deserve everything.
You do. Yeah.
It's not luck. It's not luck on your side. It's the worth that you are as a human in this world. I hate that word, luck. I always get it. I always say, people in my work say that I'm a success story. No. I just knew that I was enough. I knew that I was worth more
Then that life.
than that life. Than not being looked at as a human, not being. I think that, like, our kids deserve to feel enough. And I think that actually starts with, the message needs to start with, like, we need to look at children as children. Because majority of the time they're not looked at as our children. And that's the hardest part for our kids is, easiest way to explain it is it's like at the moment, you know, you've got these laws. I've explained it multiple times. Like, these laws is social media ban, but then you've got the jailing of the young kids.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
From the same age. So you're telling me, right? So as a professional in this sector, you're telling me that you can jail a young kid for a violent crime or a crime, but they can't have social media. How are you actually taking control, but also not giving, like, there's no control over that autonomy. Because aren't we, like, we're the first thing we're learn as humans is that, like, we have a voice and we can speak and we have the right to change, like, to our bodies and to our, like, control over our lives.
Very strange. It's a very strange one, that one. I've spoken to a few people about it, some criminal lawyers, and they couldn't even understand it, to be honest. To be able to jail them for adult crimes, but then ban them from social media. It's I don't know how it works and who comes up with these rules, but it's an interesting time.
It's people who are old, like, I'm going to be real blatant. It's people who are, like, prehistoric. Like, these people, like, look at our prime ministers, our ministers, for instance. Like, yes, we're getting some really young ones in right now. That's great. But these people who actually have the decision making in powerful places are too old. they don't have, like, there's no connection to the youth. There's no connection to these things. Like I always say, get out and actually sit in these spaces. I'm really lucky that I have ambassadored Sleep at the G for the last 2 years in a row, which is a corporate sleep at the MCG for a homelessness fund. And the conversations I get from speaking at those things is like, oh my God, I didn't know, but also you're a corporate person bringing blankets on blankets on blankets to an event. You're not actually sitting in a street feeling the way that I did as a child, a young girl living on the street at 14 to 16 in a park.
It's very true. I like how you said we need them to come in and experience some of these places, see what's going on.
There's so much of a disconnect to the systems that there's never going to be a change. I can't go into a powerful place and be like, hey, let's change shoes because I'm shoes. I don't know anything about shoes.
Yeah.
How are you going to say that about kids?
If you're not
actually sitting there
seeing
what the actual problems of today's society.
Yeah.
Because in reality, when you look at the system, from the children to the person who makes the change, there's 60 years between them.
Yeah, it's a big age.
There's at least 40 to 60 years between them. Society is ever evolving, ever changing. It's never going to change.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you.
Many good discussions, topics, things that I've learned, understood. Your stories and inspiration to know where you were, and what I think I love is that you're sitting on the side of the street watching the fireworks and you're like, there's more to life than this. And you chose to take that leap and change, and your father being supportive, your grandmother and your uncle are all proud of you, and it's an absolute honor to sit across you and hear your story and to know what you're doing, and on behalf of the children out there that you've helped and saved, keep inspiring the world. It's an absolute honor. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I really, really do admire the ethic you've done and the work style, and it's really an inspiration. Keep moving forward, and hopefully you get into the parliament.
Oh, you'll see me there.
Yeah. That's gonna be a whole different world. Are you pushing for it very hard, or are you kind of pacing at it?
I think now we need to push for it the most. Especially First Nations young people. Our voices are at the forefront right now. And it's also not a race. Like, I always say that, like, when I think about, like, what I want to do in Parliament and the impact I actually want to make and change, that's something that I can't do alone. And so it's not something that I would...
That's right.
Yeah, so it's something... Yeah, it's a team effort. And also, when I'm in Parliament, like, when I want to be in Parliament, I want a lot of young people to be there. Like, I want... I see it now. I've seen it in the last couple of months. A lot of young First Nations people, Jarvis even today. Like, we're really lucky to have some powerful Aboriginal people coming into powerful places.
It's good stuff. You are powerful, and your fire's lit. Keep fueling it.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for being on. It's an absolute honor.
Thank you.